Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 7 of History's Greatest Idiots, the show where we look back through all of human history and bring you shining examples of moderate to severe stupidity so that you can take lessons from them and never repeat those mistakes again. But who are we kidding? We're humans. We like making mistakes, and I long for the day when people acknowledge it as a necessary thing so that we can continue getting idiots for this podcast. So yeah, please continue to screw up. Joining me as ever is my amazing co-host, Derek. Derek, how are things going over in Arizona right now?
Pretty good, I think. I mean, baseball's in full swing with the boy, and I think we got senior night on Tuesday. I get to throw a pitch to him. It'll be the first time he's hit since like sophomore year.
No, that's so cool. So you're going to throw the pitch to him?
One of them in the opening. There's like the whole big senior day event where like he's gonna give his mom a rose and we throw a thing, and he's starting the game, which is neat. It's a super nice thing that they're doing there.
That's really cool. We don't really, I mean, I say that we get like performances in this country, like school plays and talent nights and stuff like that, but we don't really get like honoring the parents as much as like a kind of a focus of the school kind of interactivity thing. That the most you get for that is like parents' night, where you'll go to, oh, so and so is doing so well in like maths, you should be so proud. And then you go to the next one, it's like, it's such a fuck up in physics. Like, what is wrong with you? You're terrible parents. But like, yeah, that's really cool that you get that kind of interaction with everyone. That's a really nice bonding moment. Wow.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. It should be a good time.
Yeah, it should be as well. So baseball's in full swing. The weather's getting really nice here. I had a really so this weekend didn't really have too much in the way of plans. I did some voiceover recording yesterday. Obviously did the writing for today, and just kind of chilled. And then I went to the cinema in the evening and watched Air with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and Jason Bateman and Viola Davis. It's about Michael Jordan signing with Nike. And transforming the fortunes of.
I've got to pay more attention to like what the hell's going on in the world.
Yeah, it's actually really good. So there's been like a few kind of corporate story biopic type things in the last few years. I think it really started with The Social Network, which was hugely successful and a big Oscar thing, and we had the Tetris film. Sorry.
That was a good movie.
It was really good. My mother liked that, and she does not like technology. So you can tell that a film is good when the core principle of the film draws in someone who hates her phone. So, I really enjoyed that. There was a Tetris film recently, which was that Disney or Apple Plus? It was one of the two. I think it was Apple Plus in the UK.
I think it is here too.
Taron Egerton. Yeah, it was in it. He's in it, and a couple of other like moderately famous people. There's a famous actor playing Robert Maxwell, and he's hilarious as Robert Maxwell. And he's like, wow, I spotted the accent immediately. I was like, I recognize you. But yeah, it was good, but it strayed outside it because I kind of seen the Tetris story of how they got it out of like the USSR when it was collapsing. That element is true, but like they involve characters and people and elements of the story way more than stuff that actually happened. So it's like it's based on reality, but a lot of the stuff that happened is complete bullshit. And I get the sense, and I mean, it's a good film, Tetris. I really recommend it. So if you want something that's really interesting, kind of a bit weird, go and watch Tetris. It's quite a good fun film. Air is obviously like it's a heavy hitter. Like it's got these big names involved. It's about Nike. It involves conversations with Converse and Adidas and mentions of big name celebrities, and there's a bunch of, like I said, famous people in the film. I don't know the story of Nike because they apparently had a 17% market share of the basketball trainer sneaker industry at one point in time, and the leader was Converse, and then it was Adidas, and they were like a distant third. I don't know how much of this like underdog story rise, we'll plan this, we're different, we think differently, how much of it is like creating something using the benefit of hindsight, making it a legend,
Maybe.
where they embellish stuff, and because they know what's going to happen, it's like you know what's going to happen, but they inject drama that probably didn't happen to keep you going. I just don't know,
It's what makes good movies. It's storytelling,
It is.
I think the best story of the origin story is Prefontaine, that movie about Steve Prefontaine, who was a track star that created the Nike running shoes, whatever name.
That's right. Yeah. He isn't actually mentioned in the film. They talk about the running shoe quite a lot because that was their big thing. Context of the night story. Sorry, Dr. J. Hello and welcome. We're talking about a film I saw in the cinema last night called Air. It's out. It's on Amazon as well because I sat down and it said Amazon Studios. I was like, man, I could have watched this at home. What the fuck's wrong with me? So I watched it. And like you say, storytelling wise, it's a great story. There's some excellent performances. Viola Davis is so good in it. Chris Tucker's in it. He's really good. I was quite impressed with him as well. Yeah. Matt Damon's obviously good because Matt Damon is like super consistent. Ben Affleck's good because he's like not quite normal Ben Affleck. He's slightly different. I like that. He's not
normal Ben Affleck.
He's not standard, possibly sleeping with prostitutes and gambling his money away Ben Affleck, the thing that they embellished in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. But yeah, I really liked the film. It was a great story, really well told, and it's one of those things where there's not massive stakes. So you're like, okay, I can sit down and I can enjoy this, and I'm not going to feel like guilty about anything or like have a weird like bubbling. So it's like, if you want a nice, gentle, well-told film, I thought Air was really good. Another one that is just coming to my mind now. Have you ever seen The Founder?
Oh, yeah.
Michael Keaton. Yeah, about the McDonald's story. That was interesting as well, about how this guy just basically fucked the McDonald's brothers out of their
real
creation. Yeah. So I can't remember his name now, but Roy Kroc.
Yeah, that's
Is that it? Yeah. Really, really great film. And again, held together by a bunch of really strong performances, particularly by Michael Keaton. But yeah, I would highly recommend those. So there's like a lot of corporate stories coming up in cinema now. And I guess, a lot of corporate mergers and structures. And there's been God knows how many films made about Steve Jobs. Like 3 or something at this point. They're interesting because you take what is essentially a rags to riches story or a rise or a fall or whatever it might be, and you kind of infuse it with Hollywood bullshit, and it becomes a great film. And I really enjoyed Air. So if you get a chance to watch Air, it's like there's a lot of 80s in it as well. So if you nostalgia freaks out there, you're gonna love it. So yeah, definitely check that out. Obviously, the story of Michael Jordan signing with Nike and how that completely transformed the fortunes of that entire company. Apparently, he still earns $400 million a year in passive income to this day from his Nike deal.
Well, I would imagine he's got his own line, the Air Jordans.
Yeah, and he was the first person to supposedly get that. And one of the stipulations was he gets a cut of every shoe sold, and that had never happened before.
That's a good deal right there, man.
That's man. Like a percentage. Give me 2% of everything.
See,
wouldn't a great corporate story, 1930s to 40s, be great? Yeah, Fiat and Hugo Boss, 1930s to 40s. There's an interesting corporate story right there. Maybe not. Maybe we don't go into that. Or Peugeot or any BMW. Adi Dassler, who kept his name Adolf. Sorry, what?
I said Adidas was in on that market, weren't they?
Oh yeah, he kept the name Adolf until he died. They even talk about it in the film because Matt Damon's character's talking to the agent. He's like, "Oh, he kept the name Adolf until the day he died." Like, well, nobody really worried about that. It's very sad that he's recently died. He's left quite a legacy behind, and then it goes back to Matt Damon. He was in the Hitler Youth, right? He was like an actual Nazi, and it's like, look, let's not forget it. Let's not talk about that. He's brought a lot of joy to a lot of people, and he employs a lot of people. And now Michael Jordan's family are going to go over and meet Adidas in their headquarters in Nuremberg. And Matt Damon's like, Nuremberg, really? You're not seeing the connection here. So this is what my doctorate is in. Oh, that's cool, Dr. J. That's really interesting. Type out what your doctorate's in. That sounds really cool.
I'm intimidated now. We've got somebody with a doctorate listening.
An actual doctor. Yeah. I'm glad my mother doesn't listen and join in, because then we'd have a fucking professor as well. So that would be really annoying. So anyway, I've had a nice time. Derek, you're doing good. There's stuff happening with your son. Let's get into the idiots, shall we? Who is your idiot for this week? Okay.
Well, so it's baseball season again, like I said, and I wanted to try and tie my idiot to the sport. But as is normally the case for me. I kind of ended up somewhere different, but there's baseball in it, so stick with me.
Right. Yeah.
His real passion, though, was gambling and a little crime. But, his name...
Go on, sorry. I was going to say, it's not our man. What's his name again? Is it the guy who bet on baseball?
Oh, no. Nope.
No, it's not him.
No.
Okay.
Somebody totally different.
Okay, cool.
His name is Arnold the Brain Rothstein. And
Okay.
I think he fits in with the history's greatest idiots. If you can call somebody with a nickname, the Brain, an idiot. But,
wow. Sorry.
Hey, look at that. We got some good interaction going here today.
We have. Thank you, Dr. J. Yes, your PhD in the actions of GM, Ford, and IBM in Nazi Germany. That I would love to read that. I don't normally like to read doctoral theses, but I have read a few, particularly from applicants, and that sounds really cool. So yeah, it's okay. Derek, please continue. Sorry for the interruptions.
We're good to go here. So we're on Arnold Rothstein. He's born on January 17th, 1882 in Manhattan to wealthy Ashkenazi Jewish family.
Right.
I guess there's debate about when he was born, but it's either 1882 or 1883. Most of them are 1882, so that's what I'm going with.
Sure. Okay.
Anyway, so he's born into the wealthy family of upstanding business elites. His father, Abraham, was like the perfect picture of the American success story, working his way up in New York's garment district.
Cool.
The New York governor, Al Smith, even referred to him as Abe the Just in reference to his reputation and philanthropy and honesty.
That's good.
And his son, Arnold, is just nothing like him. Anyway, he goes on to be chairman of the board for the New York's Beth Israel Hospital. Mm-hmm. And his relationship with Arnold's older brother, Harry, is really close. And it's believed that Arnold kind of craved attention and was resentful of that relationship. So he started acting out, and it might have led to his rebellion in the first place.
Right. Okay.
I lost my spot.
That's okay.
By all accounts, he was highly skilled at math and super intelligent. So super intelligent idiots are my thing. He was not really interested in school, though. So at 16, he dropped out to pursue other interests. And those other interests were gambling and crime. Kind of
wow.
Even as a child, he had a thing for gambling. And once he began to indulge, he never stopped, no matter how often his father was scolding him for shooting dice or, running numbers. He just didn't stop. And when he was asked actually one time in 1921 how he became a gambler, he replied, "I always gambled. I can't remember when I didn't. Maybe I gambled just to show my father he couldn't tell me what to do, but I don't think so. I think I gambled because I loved the excitement. When I gambled, nothing else mattered."
That's really sad.
Kinda.
Yeah. Basically, you're rejecting reality. And yeah, that's really sad. The real world isn't enough.
I took it different. This is my drug of choice, and I'm going to stay numb. Anyway, so he starts frequenting neighborhood pool halls and gambling dens and hanging out with, the people that hang out in those places. Mostly criminal types, but also some high-level politicians and some businessmen because, not everybody's perfect.
No, that's true.
In 1901, he falls in love with a showgirl, an actress named Carolyn Green. And it was just the excuse he needed to really break away from his father, because Carolyn was only half Jewish on her father's side. So when Arnold Rothstein's father demanded that she convert and continue her relationship, or in order to continue the relationship, she refused. And Abe declared that he no longer had a second son if he was going to violate the rules of Judaism and marry outside of the faith. So 2 years later, him and Caroline go and get married in Saratoga Springs, and off he goes.
That's really sad. I don't like the whole disowning family stuff. It makes me so sad. You cut off from so much support in those moments. And really, I understand circumstances that I think there was one, John Adams, America's second president, cut off one of his sons after decades of kind of failures and horrible behavior and stuff. And that's somewhat understandable, but actually the majority of the time you are doing far more harm than good. But yeah, that's so sad.
But he became a millionaire, so it's not too sad. Anyway, well,
Yeah.
I mean, he also died really young. So anyway, 1910, he moves to the Tenderloin section of Manhattan and he sets up his own shop. He opens a really important casino and he starts investing in horse racing track or in Maryland.
Right.
And he may or may not have fixed a bunch of the races he won at that track, but whatever. He was also booking bets on baseball and elections and prize fights, and he may have fixed some of those things as well. But I'll get into that in a minute. You might remember him from Boardwalk Empire.
Oh yeah. Oh, that rings a bell now. Oh my god, that's such a good show.
It is, and I think they do a really good job of kind of capturing Arnold's character because from what I was reading and researching, he was just like the dude that played him on there. It was slightly embellished, but still. Anyway, so he's doing all of these gambling things and racetracks and fixing elections and prize fights. And that puts him in an interesting position to be a go-between for criminals, cops, politicians, and businessmen.
Right, which is probably quite a lucrative position to be in, I'd imagine, as the kind of the buffer between all these different interests.
It really was, because he started working as a fixer. And for those that are unfamiliar with that term, it's somebody that kind of smooths over a rocky relationship between law enforcement and the people that are breaking it. And he acts as a mediator, but we'll get into that also in a minute. So he becomes this gambling legend. He's raking in winnings, carrying around wads of cash. He earns a nickname, the Big Bankroll, because he likes to carry around a wad of $100 bills.
And this is the 1910s, 20s now?
It's still 1910 to 1914, 17.
Yeah.
We don't go much further than that. So
he's carrying around essentially like a normal person's lifetime earnings with him at any one time.
And he was doing that for a reason, though. It was because if any deal presented itself, he wanted to be able to take care of it right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So no time to hesitate. Now, when I was saying he rigged most of the games that he bet on, he did, and it led to massive winnings. Like he even perpetuated the idea himself by saying that he would bet on anything but the weather because he couldn't control it.
Wow. Okay.
So by his 30s, he was a millionaire.
Sure.
And by the end of the decade, his gambling joint was really popping. He's being followed around by an entourage of gangsters that went with him everywhere he went, acting as his security. And some of those people, you might have heard of them. Meyer Lansky.
Oh,
Charles Lucky Luciano.
Wow.
Anyway, so he's mentoring this next generation of business-minded mobsters.
Those are huge names. Meyer Lansky, wasn't he involved? No, maybe I'm thinking of someone else. I thought he was maybe involved in Vegas, but
I believe so. Yeah,
maybe.
Those
are two huge names.
The beginning of organized crime is this guy. So, like, if most people say Lucky Luciano was the father of modern organized crime, and so that would make Arnold Rothstein like the grandfather, or at least a super bad influence. So, according to mobster Meyer Lansky himself, Rothstein had the most remarkable brain, and he understood business instinctively. I'm sure if he had been a legitimate financier, he would have been just as rich as he became with his gambling and other rackets he ran.
Yeah, I get that. He has an acumen that can be that has crossover skills. So he could have translated that into other areas of business or life and been just as successful. But that's not what drives him. The financial world is not what drives him. His main love is gambling, and that's a dangerous thing in general. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. Wow.
Well, in 1919, he cemented his name into history because he may or may not have fixed the World Series.
Right. What?
There's a great deal of evidence both for and against his involvement in the plot to fix the series, but the the generally accepted story is that he had some of his guys, members of the early mob, pay off some of the Chicago White Sox to throw a few of the games and lose the series to the Cincinnati Reds.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the say it ain't so thing. Is that right?
The Black Sox scandal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big. First
Arnold
major
Rothstein.
Scandal in baseball, I think, really, right?
Yes. Yep. It was the big one. And he actually bet on it. And the White Sox did lose. And he took a huge payday of around $350,000.
Holy shit. I'm right. Carry on talking. I am going to find out how much that is. US inflation rate.
So he takes this big old payday of $350,000, which I should have probably looked up how much it is today. So thank you for taking care of that for me. The problem was,
sorry, what year was that? Just
1919.
1919. Right. Okay. To then 2023, and we're going to go with 350,000. You said, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Right. Let's see. That is 6.1 million in today's money in one bet.
So
holy shit.
Yeah, he's a baller.
Yeah.
The problem was the players appeared to be playing so poorly that it looked pretty obvious that they were trying to lose.
Sure.
And when the pressure mounted, there was players on the team that confessed by 1920. Shoeless Joe Jackson never, you remember him from, was it Field of Dreams?
Field of Dreams, yeah. They there's a big part of that which is about redeeming his legacy, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and in total, 8 players admitted to taking bribes. That was known as the Black Sox scandal, and none of them played a game of professional baseball ever again.
Yeah, and I understand they probably would have earned a lot of money for throwing the game, but you've got to question whether or not it was worth it for A, the destruction of their legacy, and B, the long-term loss of any earning power they would have had, because people did not look on corruption in modern-day sports back then as they do now. Now it seems to be somewhat prevalent. And yes, people still get bans and fines and all of that. But back then it was like you were gone from mainstream society.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a lot more strict back then. Anyway, Arnold got off scot-free. He was never actually able to have anything stick on him. He kept his hands super clean and totally denied that he was involved at all. Jeez. No charges. They couldn't do a thing.
No, and again, this is another staple of early 20th century crime. It's very difficult to get people on stuff unless it's like a police officer actually witnessing the crime. It's so hard to get people, and even then, the police are stitching up the wrong person. So it's it's really difficult.
Usually, somebody that somebody paid to have them snatch up instead. Anyway, By 1920, the United States ratified the 18th Amendment, and the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol became illegal.
Here we go.
Arnold saw that as a prime business opportunity to branch out into bootlegging and narcotics. So he did. He became one of the first to get his hands into the illegal alcohol trafficking business and imported booze down the Hudson River from Canada and through the Great Lakes. He also started purchasing up speakeasies or shares in them.
Right.
And he later became the first to illegally import Scotch whiskey from his own fleet of transatlantic freighters because he knew that high-end booze was going to be a niche market. It's going to be a chic thing to have.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you'd call this vertical integration today.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a really interesting element to this from the British side of things, because obviously, the whole prohibition and dry counties and all of that is a really interesting part of American history. There's also a part where a lot of smugglers use Caribbean islands and places around there to smuggle stuff into the mainland United States. And the Coast Guard were well aware of this. And they got in touch with the person who was kind of involved with administering the Caribbean islands at the time and controlling that. And that person was Winston Churchill. And they said, can you help us maybe? Because, these people have got really powerful onboard motors and they're faster than our Coast Guard ships and they're just getting away from us. And he was like, your own fucking stupid mistake for outlawing alcohol. And he refused. And actually he encouraged some of the local kind of mechanics and stuff to sell engines so that like more booze could get into America. He did not give a shit.
It's strange the like power sports influence that making alcohol illegal had on American culture with racing boats, NASCAR. All of that came from bootlegging and running alcohol.
Absolutely, yeah. So many. I want to, because we're on to Prohibition now. If anyone's listening to this and they want to watch a really like just the definitive run of what Prohibition was like in American history, there is a docu-series by Ken, what's his name?
Ken Burns,
Prohibition. It is one of the best documentaries I have ever seen. The whole thing, they talk about random events and also the bigger picture. You know, you hear about like the woman who was going around breaking glass in the dens and stuff. I can't remember. Carrie Nation cut glass. So she was breaking up. She was like just going in, this old woman smashing the place up and destroying these illegal bars. And then you've got stories about bootleg booze runners, and like they interview the son of one who would work with his dad on booze and stuff, and they would get word in advance from local police about a raid that was going to be done on their place. So his dad was like, right, quickly load everything up into the back of this hearse. They had a hearse. They drove the hearse into Arlington Cemetery and just sat there, and they're like, no one's going to check a hearse in Arlington Cemetery.
Wow.
That's so dark.
I think that is a solid plan. I never would have thought of that
plan. Yeah, exactly.
So bad though.
it's so as ways of getting around Prohibition go, that's probably like you're basically saying nobody's going to interfere with the burial of a soldier, right? So we fill this fucking thing up with all of the booze we have and then just sit there until the heat dies down. And I think it was the same guy who was like, and then we drive the truck round to all these different various government buildings and they'd buy the booze off us. I'm like, hang on.
Oh, wow. And that's in the Ken Burns documentary?
That's in the Ken Burns documentary. Yeah, I remember them talking about specifically about people knowing that Prohibition was coming up and hoarding masses of alcohol, like buying up tons and tons and tons because it was illegal to buy it, but not to own it. So they basically filled up their entire cellars from floor to ceiling with booze. But also like, and like government buildings, it was like one of the main sources of illegal booze at the time. So yeah, it's really interesting. If you watch Ken Burns' Prohibition documentary, it used to be on Netflix. I'm not sure it is anymore. Check it out. It's so good. It's probably on PBS because that's where it was originally broadcast.
He does a lot of them. He did the, what is it, U.S. in the Holocaust too?
Yeah, he did the Holocaust, did the Vietnam War. He did a really good one on the Civil War. Really great documentary on the Civil War. He also did one on baseball, which I haven't seen yet, and I really want to watch. I think that's the only Ken Burns one I haven't seen. So
I gotta get through Servant, and then I'll start watching documentaries again.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Tangent over. Please continue.
Well, in 1921, after the Black Sox scandal and his vertical integration into bootlegging drugs and narcotics, he goes back to horse racing. Under the pseudonym Redstone Stable, he acquires a racehorse named Sporting Blood.
Okay.
That horse won the 1921 Travers Stake under suspicious... why is that such a hard word? Suspicious circumstances. Yeah. And the story is that Arnold allegedly conspired with the leading trainer to drive up the odds on Sporting Blood. Right. So this trainer, Hildreth, enters an outstanding 3-year-old gray lag on the morning of the race, causing the odds to go up for Sporting Blood to 3-1.
Right.
Rothstein bets $150,000 through his bookmakers. And Purdy... the second favorite, Purdy, is off for feed. And just before post time, Hildreth scratches gray lag from the starting list, and Rothstein collects over $500,000 plus the purse from owning the horse.
Oh my God. So that's close to $1 million at that point, right? That is insane.
And it's like a gajillion dollars in today's money.
Oh God, yeah. We're not even gonna do the calculations on that. That's like pushing, like, how much did we say it was? Like 6 million for 350,000. So we're approaching $10 million for that.
He's just killing it.
He absolutely is. And like at a certain point, why are you still doing this? Why don't you just stop? You have enough money to buy an island.
Because when he's gambling, nothing else matters.
Of course. Yes, it's the rush. Okay.
So by 1926, he branches out further and becomes the financial overlord of the American narcotics trade. And now, with even more money and ever-growing power, he's kind of running things. He's actually mediating disputes between the different New York and Chicago gangs and charging them a hefty fee for his services.
I'm not surprised.
Also, around that same time, he starts purchasing and importing heroin from Europe and selling it through his underworld connections for like huge profits. He's like the first person to figure out how to do this, I guess.
Wow.
He becomes the first modern drug dealer in the U.S., like way before El Chapo and Pablo Escobar.
Wow, yeah, definitely.
And they were way more profitable than booze and bootlegging, so he kind of settled in as the kingpin. But gambling, couldn't get away from it. He continued his organized crime connections with Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, other dangerous folks like Dutch Schultz, Jack Legs Diamond, or Gentleman Jack, as you may know him, Frank Costello. These are all his friends. These are all the people that he's hanging out with.
These are not the people you want as friends. Holy shit.
Lucky Luciano actually kind of worshipped him. And
really?
He's quoted as saying, he taught me how to dress, how to use knives and forks and things like that at the dinner table.
Wow.
About holding the door open for a girl. And I think if Arnold had lived a little longer, he could have made me pretty elegant. And that's Lucky Luciano, the father of modern organized crime.
That's really interesting, because what you're essentially doing is you're infusing thugs and gangsters and criminals and like horrible mass murderers with the behaviors and trappings of high class society, so they can fit in more, become more accepted as part of the elite. And it's even harder to trap them then, because if they're ingratiated with powerful, famous, elegant people, then they're going to be seen as part of the scene, and that's even harder to break at that point. You're part of the establishment. It's very hard to get out.
Oh, yeah. If you become one of them, you can do bad things and only get slaps on the wrist.
Pretty much, yeah.
Until they kick you out and raid your Mar-a-Lago home.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I would argue my point about like conspiracy theories and how they give people too much credit, but time and time again, we're seeing people in various institutions get away with significantly horrific things and just get barely a slap on the wrist. Yeah. So please continue. This is really interesting now. Really,
well, he never actually got into trouble because he didn't live all that much longer.
Oh shit.
As is the case for most American mobsters, his rise was rapid, his life was short, and his death was violent.
Wow. Okay.
The beginning of the end happened in October 1928, where he joined a poker game that lasted for 4 days.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, how? I mean, I know they're importing drugs, so they might be doing amphet or speed or something, or cocaine, but 4 days?
Poker games can go on a while.
What about if you need a poo?
Well,
Well,
there's intermissions.
Oh, great.
You pull your stuff out. It's like
9 hours so you can go and have a shower and a sleep. Like,
I don't know. Maybe they did. God, you'd be tired after 4 days of playing poker.
You would. Yeah, man. Your brain would be fried.
Well, in a fun little twist, though, Arnold, the master of fixing games, found himself in a game that appeared to be fixed by somebody that wasn't him.
Oh, no way. That's amazing.
Allegedly, the game was rigged by a pair of gambler mobsters, the Titanic Thompson and Nate Raymond, who ended up with Arnold owing them somewhere in the ballpark of $300,000.
I mean, that's chump change at this point, right? He's earning that for like brokering deals, surely.
Yeah. I was trying to, he knew it was fixed, though, so he refused to pay. It wasn't about the money. It's about, like,
I invented the con you just used.
Yeah. Don't you me.
Wow.
So he refuses to pay up, and on November 4th, 1928, he's headed to Manhattan Park Central Hotel. And according to some stories, it's for a business meeting. Other stories say it's for a poker game. And then others still say that it was in response to this mysterious phone call asking him to come to the hotel for some reason or another.
All right.
I'm going to go with the one that was told by Encyclopedia Britannica and biography.com because they seemed the most creditable.
Yeah.
So he arrives at the hotel, joins in this other high stakes poker game, and he just really didn't realize how high stakes it was going to be, I guess. I like puns. After about an hour of joining the game, he staggers out the service entrance of the hotel where he's discovered bleeding from a 38 caliber gunshot wound.
Ooh.
Police followed his trail of blood back to the poker game that was still in progress.
Oh, for fuck's sake, guys. Come on.
And in keeping with Mobster code, he never named the person that shot him. And no one was ever convicted of his murder. On November 6, 1928, he succumbed to his wounds in New York Polyclinic Hospital. But, like I said, his story lived on. His likeness was carried into entertainment, both as the character Nathan Detroit in the musical Guys and Dolls and as Meyer Wolfsheim in the novel The Great Gatsby. Those are both modeled on him.
Oh, that's interesting.
And like I said, he appeared in Boardwalk Empire, played by Michael Stuhlbarg. But
sorry, what was the first name that he was given in popular culture? It sounded like Jackie Daytona, which is from What We Do in the Shadows. But sorry, what was it?
Nathan Detroit from Guys and Dolls.
Right. Okay. There you go. That makes sense.
Was that other guy kind of like a satire spin on the spoof on that?
No, it was just Matt Berry. It was Matt Berry's character. Sorry, is it Laszlo? Is confronted by Mark Hamill, vampire Mark Hamill, and he just he fucks off and assumes a different identity, and it's Jackie Daytona, and he's got the only thing that's changed about him is he's put a toothpick in his mouth, and he's a bartender now. And then Mark Hamill catches up. I'm a bartender, but he doesn't even change his accent. It's still the ridiculous Matt Berry voice that he does in everything. So he's like a bartender in this random thing, and then Mark Hamill's character randomly walks into the bar and he's like, oh shit, the gig's up. But Mark Hamill doesn't recognize him because he's got a toothpick in his mouth and his name's Jackie Daytona. So it's honestly, I can't recommend What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show, enough. It is so fucking funny. It might be the funniest thing I've seen in about 10 years.
I'm going to have to get on that one too, man.
So
I got to get a list here. Somebody taking notes.
Yeah, honestly, it's because it's written by Jermaine Clement of the Flight of the Conchords, and also Taika Waititi. It's just he because they did the original film, What We Do in the Shadows, which was like an independent thing and helped launch Taika's career. It's such a good series, and Matt Berry's character in particular, who is like a flamboyant, even more ridiculous version of what Matt Berry is like in real life. He has a specific way of talking and he mispronounces words. New York City and stuff like that. And it was one bit where their familiar is chasing someone around the house, and who's called Guillermo, but they're refusing to call him that. They call him Gizmo. So he just goes, he's chasing someone around the house, and he goes, Gizmo, shut the fuck up! I'm doing a piece to camera. And it's just it's so fucking brilliant. So sorry,
What We Do in the Shadows,
Jackie Daytona. What We Do in the Shadows. It's so good. So wow, this guy had a massive influence.
He did. He touched all. Well, that's a bad way to put that. He touched all kinds of gangsters.
I mean,
all the gambling.
He molded them.
To my DraftKings, though. Play some bets on the baseball games.
Yeah, basically you need to find someone like him where everything seems to go his way and just somehow find out what he's going to be betting on and just do that straight away because he's going to be right. He is kind of the mold from which most modern gangsters have been formed from. He's this well-mannered, gentlemanly, well-dressed, but completely cutthroat and vicious organizer, and that's been the prototype of every organized crime lord since this guy. Yeah. I never knew that it was because you think of it as a cliche now, right? We've seen all the Scorsese films, we've seen all the TV shows, Sopranos, and they're all very much of that type, even going back to The Godfather and stuff like that. And yeah, I guess the exception will be Scarface, which is just, just like a psychopath, basically,
Right.
as a crime lord. But yeah, it's really interesting to find like patient zero of the crime lord dynasty, essentially, that, wow.
Yeah, it was like a perfect storm of prohibition and
Yep.
business meets crime all at the same time. And honestly, this dude's got some of the coolest nicknames, though. He's Mr. Big, the Fixer, the Big Bankroll, and the Brain.
It's kind of, and I'd imagine he was one of the first people to be called those names as well. That's really, really interesting. And actually, so he died in 1928, you say?
Yes, on November 6th, 1928.
That's really interesting because the next year, well, actually a few months later, we're talking about the major stock market crash, which I wonder what he would have done during the Depression. That would have been a really interesting time because this guy never seemed to care about it. It didn't seem that philanthropic, which you find with like El Chapo was very philanthropic and gave millions upon millions of dollars away to these poor communities, partially so that he could hide in there safely from anyone finding him and stuff.
The Robin Hood method.
The Robin Hood method, exactly. And you don't seem to get that with this guy. It seems to be about him fulfilling his own gambling needs and being powerful. So
yeah, he just keeps his hands clean and stays tight with some really vicious people.
Yeah,
like at the same time as Al Capone was coming out, he was dealing with Lucky Luciano. They had a little battle at the time. So
that is really, really interesting. And again, this is going to be something that will follow through to my story as well. Really, well, in a way, the thing is, this guy could have stopped at any time and retired and disappeared and lived out his days.
Yes.
At this point, he has enough money to essentially buy an island and be like, try and do what McAfee did and basically become the ruler of an island. But he didn't do it because he couldn't recognize that he had a problem, and that was what was driving. And it was ultimately what was going to take him to his early grave, because I think what we're looking at here is quite crippling gambling addiction, but someone who is also smart enough to fix the outcomes of these events. So it's not really gambling anymore at that point. So
well, I mean, it's gambling if you're playing with other people that are fixing it.
Well, yeah, exactly. So it's a really interesting story of someone who should have stopped but couldn't. And that problem led to their downfall. And this man, had he gone the route, and this is a really interesting question. They talked about if he'd gone into finance, he'd have done really, really well as well. Given that this guy was probably the most powerful, like gambling hustler / gangster in America at the time, or one of like maybe 5 or 10. Imagine if he'd gone into finance and he hadn't got involved in gambling and he'd stayed around in the 1920s. Would we have had the Depression and the stock market crash of 1929 had this guy been heavily involved in the higher levels of finance?
Depends on who he actually made friends with if he never gambled.
That's true.
Because it could have been way worse.
Friends. Yeah. That's really, really interesting story. Thanks for covering that, Derek. I do like stories like that.
I had a fun time with it for sure.
Yeah, I can tell actually, and this is going to be a difficult one to score because he's definitely an idiot. But it's one of those ones where he was so successful and so significantly influential as well, but not so much so that he couldn't see problems coming, and he was, by the sounds of it, taking more and more risks with like who he was gambling with and how he was doing it. And yeah, so I would say he's probably an 83.
Ooh, okay, I'll take that.
I think so, yeah, because this is someone, and again, it's wasted potential. This is someone who could have been a huge figure in United States politics, finance, or carried on with his organized crime shit. He could have carried on doing that for years and years, decades.
Could have been a Rockefeller.
He could have been a Rockefeller. He could have been the underworld's Rockefeller, but he didn't, because he didn't see the problems coming, and that's his big weakness. And really, at this point in time, if anyone did want to take him down, they're like, he's a degenerate gambler, let's get him that way, and it wouldn't have been hard, would it?
Right.
So
Yeah.
You know, and that's the problem is if you are really powerful and really good at what you do and you are really, really influential, but you have a really glaring weakness, you're basically fucked. Because no matter how, you know, many friends you have, how powerful you are, if your one weakness is easy to exploit, you're doomed. So
that's true. Yeah, and that's the thing with gambling addiction. Well, you just don't know when to stop.
Exactly.
And you're wide open.
It's interesting, you know, we because we've talked about addiction in the past and how it can shape certain people's lives and stuff. I remember when I was in university the second time, my best friend had worked in a casino, and he was like, "We should go to this one in Wolverhampton." So we went to a casino because they had free food and drink. After a certain point in the night, it was like 10 o'clock, and they bring out the food, and we were like, "Oh, great!" We'd stick around for that, and we go in. And we bet on the we'd go in with £40 and we would bet on the roulette wheels and we do the rows because you've got 3 rows and a 0. So we'd put £5 down on one row, £5 down on a second row. That way you've got kind of a 66% chance of winning unless it lands on 0. And, you know, we'd either make out of there with like 60, £70 instead of 40, or we'd like break even. We'd stop gambling when we hit the £40 mark, and then we just wait for the food and drink to arrive, and we'd have that for free, and then we'd leave because we got a free meal, basically, because we were poor students.
Outside of the free drink and meal, my senior year of high school, because gambling was legal in Arizona for 18-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of how, after I got in my accident and stopped delivering auto parts, I started going out to the Fort McDowell Casino with my buddy Tim and doing the same thing. But
it's amazing, isn't it?
Split the 000 with $2.
Ah, that's smart. That's really smart. I should have done that. But it was a nice way of like, okay, you know, we've come out of this with like 20, £30. That's all our food for this week, you know, or like that's, you know, maybe we can have a meal out or something like that. But we would see people go in there and like lose £2,000 in a night, and then the next night win 5,000, and then the next night lose 4,000, and it's just like, what on earth? They are completely out of control.
Casinos are amazing. And like when my wife was pregnant with my son back in like 04, 05, I was working as a valet at Casino Arizona.
Right.
And I would see those people, you know, my VIPs, my people that tipped me $100 would come in and lose just so much money and then win so much money, and they'd take care of you. And none of them actually ever really seemed like really wealthy people, the ones that were gambling that way. They were just scraping by, it seemed like.
Yeah, and I guess that's the same thing as the, you know, people who have a lot of money and who've got there through graft and hard work typically don't like to gamble their money. Typically, they'll leverage it some way. Like there'll be something else that can take the fall. Maybe it's a different corporation or government funding or whatever it is, but they are always going to be fine. Their money will always be fine. It's everyone else's money that you need to be worried about. So yeah, that's a really interesting one. So I'm happy to give the prototype of gangster lifestyle and gambling an 83, because you think about the legacy he left behind. He set the mold for some incredibly dangerous and horrible people over the years to be successful and not viewed as thugs, which they were. So yeah,
I mean, that's the original like sit downs between the gangs and stuff. Was it the 5 families, whatever?
Yeah, the 5 families in New York and Chicago and Kansas City and that lot. Yeah, wow. Really interesting time in American history. So thanks for doing that. And also, once again, if anybody's listening to this and they want to find out more about the Prohibition era, the Ken Burns documentary Prohibition is an excellent source. It's like 20 hours or something over maybe 9-10 episodes, something like that. It's great. So I would really, really highly recommend that. So from your idiots who just didn't know when to stop to my idiots who could have stopped but were involved in the most violent armed robbery in American history. So I'd like to talk. I'd like to talk to you right now about the North Hollywood Shootout of the late 1990s.
Oh, wow.
You know the one I'm talking about. These fuckers. So some of you may not know what this is about. you may have seen the news footage, because this entire thing is available to view on the internet, on YouTube. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it's quite violent, even though it's shot from a distance, but it is incredible footage.
Oh, it's mimicked in so many movies too.
It is.
They actually train for it at Quantico for the FBI on how to deal with it.
Yeah,
it's the thing that sparked militarization of U.S. police.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about that, about how if it weren't for this armed robbery, police would not be carrying semi-automatic weapons. There wouldn't be films that are made in a specific way, like The Town with Ben Affleck and Jeremy Renner, kind of basically this whole thing. And also basically the entire, like, there's a number of threads in the Grand Theft Auto series that owe everything to this moment in time.
Oh, yeah.
So those games would not be as successful without this moment. And also, just a quick thing, I also need to thank my buddy Wendigoon for the inspiration behind this video. He produced a great video on YouTube. He always does great videos on YouTube about this incident, which I recommend you go and watch. He's very entertaining and just a really lovely guy as well. He's getting married soon, so congratulations, Wendigoon.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah. Also, warning as well, this contains descriptions of quite intense violence. So if that ain't your bag, go and listen to our last podcast. We talk about like George Lazenby banging his way through his one and only James Bond film. So just go and listen to that instead. But let's get to this one now. So Larry Eugene Phillips Jr., born the 20th of September, 1970. And this is going to be difficult. Decebal Ștefan Emilian Emil, and I'll be using that name from now on instead of his surname, Mătăsăreanu.
Wow.
Yeah. And
what
all of the A's
name?
have got that like circumflex above them. So I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So it's Mătăsăreanu. He's descended from Romanian. He's a Romanian kind of exile type thing. Not exile, expat. Who was born on the 19th of July, 1966. First met at Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, California in 1989. Phillips, who was 6'4" and weighed 193 pounds, and Emil, who was 6'2" and weighed 330 pounds. Big motherfucker right there.
Holy moly.
Yeah. They had a mutual interests in weightlifting, bodybuilding, firearms, flower pressing, and stamp collecting. I made those last two up.
Okay. It was like, what?
Yeah. The real ones were weightlifting, bodybuilding, and firearms, which sounds like Pain and Gain, that terrible film that what's his name made as a passion project. But yeah, that's kind of three things that I don't think necessarily go well, because if you have an interest in bodybuilding, there's certain activity that goes involved in that, performance enhancing, and specific chemicals in that range. Probably not a great combination with firearms.
May or may not make you rage.
May or may not make you rage for a period of time. And if you happen to have an AR-15 in your hands, that ain't going to end well. Before their meeting, Phillips was an habitual offender responsible for multiple real estate scams and counts of shoplifting. Emil, on the other hand, was born in Timișoara. I don't know. I have a Romanian colleague. I should have asked her. In Romania, to parents who relocated to Los Angeles in 1974, and was a qualified electrical engineer and ran a relatively unsuccessful computer repair business. So he's a legit guy, whereas the other guy's like a career criminal.
Okay.
However, on their friends, they get into bodybuilding and working out at the gym, and share their love of firearms,
shooting
guns, having fun, taking steroids potentially, because nobody gets to 330 pounds naturally at 6'2". Like that's unless you're like a Samoan dude or something. They're pretty big, but
he wasn't. Was he?
Jacked.
Was he?
No,
was he?
He's Romanian, so he was pretty jacked. I mean, it was like that roid belly thing where you had to have a six-pack, but it also protrudes a little bit.
So kind of like the strongest man in the world competition guys, like power lifter guy.
Basically, yeah, the kind of the low center of gravity, bulky frame. I guess we call it stocky in the UK. Dr. J here. How do you press flowers when you can't put your arms down fully? Exactly. That's why I was joking. You can't get it beyond like that point because the muscles below your armpit can't let you do that. You can press them down and they'll just spring right back up again like you fucking action.
Maybe he presses them in his pits.
Yeah, maybe that's what he does. Crushes them that way. They smell terrible. So him and his parents relocated to America in 1974. But we should also mention in the 1980s and 90s, it was the kind of the second golden age of armed robbery in the United States, because obviously in the 1930s, it was a big thing. You know, a lot of people robbing banks with Tommy guns and you know, getting away in a car and there being a shootout. But in the 80s and 90s, it was a really, really big problem. There was a big epidemic of actual armed robbers basically finding homeless people and drug addicts, giving them a small gun, sending them into a bank with a note that they'd written, and then when they'd walk out with like $1,000, $2,000, splitting the money with them, and those guys would go away and blow it on drugs, and they'd keep their share of the money.
Wow.
So that was a big problem. But occasionally someone would make off with like tens of thousands of dollars because they would actually plan the actual robbery. And it was such a point that there was something like 30,000 robberies a year in the 90s. Ooh. Lots and lots of robberies, a lot of them over on the West Coast. For some reason, I don't know whether it's proliferation of guns or poverty or what, but who knows?
I don't know. I'm trying to remember because I'm out here on the West Coast and I was here in the 90s, I think. I don't know. Apparently, the bank by my house got robbed like twice, and that was in 2000 though.
Yeah, when we get robberies in this country as well, but they never do banks. I mean, unless it's like Hatton Garden, which was a big thing about 10 years ago, the Hatton Garden job in London. Most of the places that get robbed in this country are like low-level convenience stores and stuff like that, and they never involve. There's rarely ever firearms involved. It's usually like a bat or a knife or something like that, because we don't generally have guns in this country.
Or like Terry in one of our last seasons, he taped up a brush and made it look like
a brush and pretended it was a gun. Didn't work. These two get involved with guns and bodybuilding and armed robberies thing, and they're like, hey, why don't we give that a go? We're big, we've got guns. On the 20th of July 1993, Phillips and Emil robbed an armored car outside a branch of First Bank in Littleton, Colorado. On October the 29th, they were arrested in Glendale, California, northeast of Los Angeles, for operating a stolen vehicle, which that's a big red flag right there. Got two guys in a stolen vehicle. They might be planning to use it for something.
Possibly, yeah. Did they look into it further?
And they did. A subsequent search of the vehicle after Phillips surrendered with a concealed weapon found 2 semi-automatic rifles, 2 handguns, more than 1,600 rounds of 7.62 by 39 millimeter rifle ammunition, 1,200 rounds of 9 by 19 millimeter Parabellum and .45 ACP handgun ammunition, radio scanners, smoke bombs, improvised explosive devices, body armor vests, and 3 different Californian license plates.
Oh my God. Good. They stopped the robbery.
Slightly suspicious.
Did we go through the time warp here? They went back in time and stopped it here?
No.
Oh.
Let's talk about how the courts and the criminal justice system handled this. They're armed to the fucking teeth.
Dude,
and they've got explosive smoke bombs, armored, like bulletproof vests, different license plates. Send them to jail for a long time, right?
Yeah, they're up to something, I think.
They're really up to something. Didn't happen. Initially charged with conspiracy to commit armed robbery. Of course, that's what they were doing. Both served 100 days in jail.
Not 100 days.
3 and a bit months.
And I guarantee
you get that for like public urination or like I don't know, drunken behavior and spitting at a police officer or something like that. You can get a long time for that, but 100 days. What's this here? Dr. J has got a thing. I grew up in LA and was a youth in the 1990s. Huge number of bank branches opened as suburbs spread and retail banking exploded. Also, lots of guns coming out of the major boom in drug trade, gangs, both domestically and internationally. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a weird time.
Yeah,
and then
ironically,
the war on drugs, but also interestingly, the crime rate in the 90s at a certain point took a massive decline. And at the time, people didn't understand what it was. And then years later, they figured out that, yes, it was getting tougher on crime. That was part of it. Yes, they got rid of some of the crack in the streets. Yes, that was part of it. But the majority of the reason why there was a massive drop off in crime was because Roe v. Wade had come into effect 18 years earlier, and a whole generation of criminals that would have been raised in single parent families weren't there to commit crime.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So we get to deal with that again.
18 years time, you wait. Massive surge in crime. So anyway, back to this. So they've been sentenced to 3 and a bit months in jail, partially, and also 3 years probation due to a plea bargain. I can't imagine a plea bargain that would get you such a little time in jail as that when you are that armed. Maybe they gave up their firearms guy. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like if you've got that much firepower with you and explosives and dangerous shit, and you're in a stolen car, it should kind of stack up to where, what did they do? Like, speeding ticket? Is that what it was?
Basically, yeah. And like, I can't understand, because this is the 90s. This is when people are getting really long sentences for this shit.
It's because they didn't have any crack on them.
Yeah, that's it. If they'd had weed, if they'd had like a pound of weed, they'd have been looking at 25 to life or something.
Yeah, mandatory minimums and whatnot.
Yeah. After their release, most of their seized property was returned to them, except for the confiscated firearms and explosives. So they still got to keep the license plates, the scanners, the body armor. That's fucking crazy to me.
Did they get to keep the stolen car?
I think that was probably seized as well.
So they didn't get the guns or the car
or the explosives.
Everything else.
But everything else, everything will save you a bit of money. Right, here you go. Keep this. On June 14th, 1995, Phillips and Emil ambushed a Brinks armored car in Winteca, Los Angeles, killed one guard, Herman Cook, and seriously wounded another. Again, this could have been avoided if they'd been given a proper serious criminal sentence.
Oh, yeah.
In May 1996, they robbed 2 branches of Bank of America in the San Fernando Valley area of Los Angeles, stealing approximately $1.5 million. The pair were dubbed the High Incident Bandits by investigators due to the weaponry they had used in 3 robberies prior to their attempt in North Hollywood. So after stealing $1.5 million in the mid-90s, so that's $750,000 each, it's not quite as long ago. You're probably doubling that. I'd say 1.5 million each again. Just retire, right? Isn't that the point of this?
The right investment, and they would have been okay.
Exactly. Buy yourself a small house. Start a small business. Be careful. Keep your overheads low. You can retire super young. These guys are in their 30s. They're not old. And get out. You've made out with a lot of money in 2 robberies, but you've already gotten away with it once. Stop. But they couldn't, I think, because they kind of loved getting shitloads of money. I think they got very excited about it. And we'll talk about how they got around it as well, because the planning that went into this next one is crazy. On the morning of February the 28th, 1997, after months of preparation that included extensive reconnoitering of their intended targets, reconnaissance, I guess, the Bank of America branch located at 6600 Laurel Canyon Boulevard, Larry and Emil armed themselves with a semi-automatic HK-91 and several illegally converted weapons, 2 Norinco Type 56S rifles, a fully automatic Norinco Type 56S1, and a fully automatic Bushmaster XM15 dissipator.
And this is back before ARs were everywhere.
I know, yeah. You're gonna have to tell me if that's overkill, because I don't know anything about that. But yeah. Oh, sorry. this is really close to my neighborhood where I grew up. Although by this time I'd moved to the East Coast. You probably got out at the right time because it's about to kick off.
Oh yeah,
yeah. The
trying
robbers.
to look up this gun because I haven't.
Yeah,
I
the
don't recognize
Norinco Type 56S rifle, and then the S1.
It's like an AK-47 type.
Right. Okay. Well, that's probably a good choice because it won't jam. And then the fully automatic Bushmaster XM15 dissipator, which, I mean, that sounds fucking terrifying right there.
I think that's some sort of AR-15.
Right. Yeah. So they've got four semi-automatic, because they've got an HK91. So they've got 4 semi-automatic weapons. We've not even got into the handguns because they did have handguns, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. The robbers allegedly filled a jam jar with gasoline and placed it in the back seat of the vehicle with the intention of setting the car and the weapons on fire to destroy evidence after the robbery. I'm not sure that would do the trick.
That was in the town.
Was it? Oh, yeah. Wow. Yes, it was. You're right. They did that. Holy shit.
Sneaky.
Yeah, Ben Affleck stealing from real life. Phillips wore roughly 40 pounds, 18 kilograms of equipment, including a Type 3A bulletproof vest and groin guard, a load-bearing vest with military-type ammo pouches, and several pieces of homemade body armor created from spare vests, covering his shins, thighs, and forearms. He's a fucking knight in armor at this point.
Dude, I can't imagine bulletproof shin guards would really do much. You're still going to break your leg.
Basically, yeah, it's still going to shatter your leg if you get hit with the right round. And also thighs and forearms. I get it, but not really going to hit that. I just want him to be wearing like a darling cravat as well. Just like a little floral design just to offset the design of this whole outfit. Emil, on the other hand, went a little bit more basic. He wore a Type 3A bulletproof vest, which included a metal ballistic plate to protect vital organs. Fucking Tony Stark over here. Additionally, each man had a watch sewn onto the back of one of their gloves in order to monitor their timing. Serious preparation went into this robbery.
Yeah, that's high skill level type.
Yeah,
that's military execution type crap.
Exactly. And the reason they did all this is this bank had allegedly in the one safe had $750,000 in it. So it's another massive score for them. Before entering, they took the barbiturate phenobarbital prescribed to Emil as a sedative to calm their nerves so that they could have steady fingers. And that's even more preparation.
That's what snipers do.
Exactly. The forensic toxicology laboratory of the coroner's office, so kind of giving away the ending here, later also found ephedrine and phenopropanolamine in Phillips's blood and fentanyl in Emil's blood. So they are off their fucking heads.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Look at them go.
Hey, man, like
party time.
Open the vault and give me the money, man. They're so calm. Phillips and Emil driving a white 1987 Chevrolet Celebrity arrived at the Bank of America branch at the intersection of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Archwood Street in North Hollywood around 9:16 a.m. and set their watch alarms for 8 minutes, the police response time they had estimated based on their feedback and results and research and stuff like that. 9:16 in the morning. I get that people aren't quite alert yet and stuff, but this is like morning rush hour time. Would you really be doing it then?
I mean, at 9:16, you'd figure everybody would be going into the office. There's not anybody going to be coming with their deposits yet, really. A lot of people will be at work for the day. I think that would be a slower time for a bank. I mean, also, the freeways would have to be batshit crazy, but
yeah. I guess as well, it might have been between police shifts, potentially. Maybe they were like, oh, there's a changeover at 9 a.m. or something. Maybe that's what they did. Yeah, that would make sense because there's no explanation here. But to me, that was just an odd time to be doing it. I was like, well, wouldn't you do it like towards the end of the day or like like when night is starting to come in, so it's harder to track and trace you or whatever. But yeah, it must have been between shifts. Anyway, to come up with this time frame, Phillips had used a radio scanner to, probably the one he was given back after 100 days in prison, to monitor police transmissions prior to the robbery. As the two were walking in, they were spotted by LA police officers, Lauren Farrell and Martin Perillo, who were driving down Laurel Canyon in a patrol car. That's the problem with this shit in like broad daylight. You walk in looking like a knight with a fucking submachine gun on your arm. People are going to notice that shit at that time in the morning. Great point from Dr. J here. Lots of traffic on the 405 at that time for sure. So it would have made the police response slightly harder, I guess. So if they weren't in the local area, it would have taken them a lot longer to get there. But they've already been spotted. 9:16. They're not even through the door, and police are already raising the alarm. Yeah, so it's the beginning of the end, basically, right there.
Busted.
Officer Farrell issued a call on the radio, 15A43, requesting assistance. We have a possible 211 in progress at the Bank of America. Apparently 211 is the code for a robbery. As they entered the bank, each armed with an Orinco Type 5.6 S1 rifle, Phillips and Emil forced a customer leaving the ATM lobby near the entrance into the bank and onto the floor. So they're not even actually into the bank at this point. They're already starting to scuffle with people. And as a result of that, a security guard inside saw the scuffle and the heavily armed robbers and radioed his partner in the parking lot to call the police. The call, unfortunately, didn't go through due to a problem with the radio. So, but it's okay. The police have already seen it, so it doesn't matter.
They're already called.
Yeah. Phillips shouted, "This is a fucking holdup." I'm just doing a random voice. It's probably not what he sounded like. Before he and Emil opened fire into the ceiling in an attempt to scare the approximately 30 bank staff and customers and to discourage resistance. As if anyone's going to resist these two when they're armed to the teeth like that.
Yeah.
Emil shot open the bulletproof door, which was designed to resist only low-velocity rounds, and gained access to the tellers and the vault. The robbers forced assistant manager John Villagrana to open the vault. Villagrana obliged and began to fill the robbers' money bag. However, due to a change in the bank's delivery schedule, the vault contained significantly less than the $750,000 the gunman had expected. Emil, this is where it gets really funny. Emil, enraged at this development, argued with Villagrana and demanded more in an apparent show of frustration and probably roid rage. Emil then fired a full drum magazine of 75 rounds into the bank's safe, destroying much of the remaining money. You absolute fucking doofus. No wonder your business is failing.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just going to shoot the money that is here.
It's not enough money. I'm going to shoot it. I'm going to make little money.
I'm going to make more money by doubling it, by cutting it in half. You idiot. He then attempted to open the bank's ATM, but due to a change in policies, the branch manager no longer had access to the money inside. Before leaving, the robbers locked the hostages in the bank vault. That's a dick move because it's fully airtight. They got out. They were all fine. But in the end, the two left with $303,305.
That's
and
not...
3 die packs, which they hadn't checked for, they didn't see, and which immediately exploded, ruining all of the money.
Oh,
womp,
man.
Womp.
Well,
that's a bit
they
of a bust.
tried.
They tried, and they've already been
the cops
spotted.
weren't called.
At least the cops didn't see them walking through the fucking door, did they? Outside, the first responding officers heard the gunfire within the bank and made another radio call reporting shots fired before taking cover behind their patrol car. With the robbers, while the robbers were inside, additional North Hollywood Division patrol and detective units arrived and took strategic positions at all 4 corners of the bank and established a perimeter around it. They're circling the fucking wagons at this point. Like, you're not getting out of here.
Yeah.
At approximately 9:24 a.m., Phillips exited through the north door and after spotting a police cruiser 200 feet away, opened fire for several minutes.
Oh, man. What time did you say?
9:24 a.m.
Oh,
so they were in there for 8 minutes.
Wow.
Bang on 8 minutes.
Quickly.
Even though they decided to shoot up the bank vault and lock everyone in there, they were in there for 8 minutes. So, yeah. In the initial shooting, Phillips wounded Sergeant Dean Haynes, Officer Martin Whitfield, James Zabaravan, Stuart Guy, and detectives William Krulak and Tracy Angeles, as well as 3 civilians that had been taken cover behind Sergeant Haynes's patrol vehicle. Jesus. That's a lot of people. Yeah.
From watching the video, that it was
Sounds
just kind of
right.
spray and pray, man.
Basically, yeah, he just utterly nailed everything that he could see. Phillips also fired at an LAPD helicopter flown by Charles D. Perugia Jr. as it surveyed the scene from above, forcing it to withdraw to a safer distance. Phillips briefly retreated inside and then re-emerged through the north doorway, while Emil exited through the south doorway. It sounds like an episode of Scooby-Doo, where they're just like running from door to door, being chased like that, backwards and forwards. Phillips and Emil continued to engage with officers, firing sporadic bursts into the patrol cars and that had been positioned on Laurel Canyon in front of the bank and in the parking lot across the street. Officers who were mostly armed with then LAPD standard issue Beretta 92F or FS 9mm pistols, Smith & Wesson model 15.38 special revolvers, and 12-gauge Ithaca model 37 pump-action shotguns, continued to return fire at both robbers, but found quickly that their handguns and shotguns would not penetrate the body armor worn by Phillips and Emil because they're, big guys covered in armor. It's just not going to work.
Well, and you're not getting close enough to have a handgun or shotgun be effective at all anyway.
Exactly, because they're like 200 feet away. So the shotgun's going to do nothing at that range, and your handgun's just going to ping off them like it's a Derringer bullet or something like that. Right. This was compounded by the fact that most of the LA police officers' service pistols had insufficient range at longer distances, where most officers found themselves positioned relative to the bank's entrance. An officer was heard on the LAPD frequency approximately 10 to 15 minutes into the shootout, warning other officers that they should not stop the getaway vehicle. They've got semi-automatic weapons. There's nothing we can do to stop them. Additionally, the officers were pinned down by the heavy sprays of gunfire coming from the robbers, making it extremely difficult to attempt a headshot with their handgun. And several other officers, though, this is interesting, acquired 5 AR-15 style rifles from a nearby gun shop to combat the robbers. Police business. We need every weapon that hasn't been taken by an obvious mental health patient or a man with curly hair who thinks he's Jesus or 3 toddlers in a trench coat. We need every weapon you have.
Yeah, it was weird because they just straight up jacked the gun stores. It's not like they even paid for it.
No, they were just like
commandeering this.
We'll bring it back later when it will be worth significantly less. 2 locations adjacent to the bank, north parking lot, provided good cover for the officers and detectives. Police likely shot Phillips with the handguns, while Phillips was still firing and taking cover near the 4 vehicles adjacent to the north wall of the bank. On one location, that Officer Richard Zielinski of Valley Traffic Division, not a good day to be trying to get people parking tickets, used it for cover adjacent to Del Taco restaurant. Nice. You could just stop in. Can I have some food, please? I'm in the middle of a shoot. I'm commandeering this food.
Give me a mucho burrito now.
I need as little water in that burrito as you can get. 351 feet away from Phillips, Zielinski fired 86 9mm rounds at Phillips and is believed to have hit Phillips during the exchange. Zielinski was also able to use this position to draw Phillips' fire away from Sergeant Haynes and Officer Whitfield, who were both wounded and had only marginal cover behind the trees across Laurel Canyon Boulevard. The other location that proved advantageous for the LAPD was the backyard of 6641 Agnes Avenue. A cinder block wall provided relative cover for several detectives shooting at Phillips with their 9mm pistols. That's,
just throw rocks. It's going to do the
just
same.
Like shout harsh language at them from that distance. Detective Bancroft and Detective Harley in particular, who were in a position themselves behind the cover and fire between 15 to 24 rounds at Phillips from a distance of approximately 55 feet. Well, that's a bit closer, but still
pretty far, but
still not doing much with it. After Emil backed the Chevrolet Celebrity, Do you want a car with great city mileage? Do you want a car that soaks up the fire of poorly trained LA police officers? Then come on down to your local Chevy dealership and inquire about the Chevy Celebrity. Chevy Celebrity, wherever you need gunfire cover. I love the name, Chevy Celebrity. That's really weird. Out of the handicapped, oh my God. He backed the Chevy Celebrity out of the handicapped space. You scumbag. He parked it in a handicapped spot. You scumbag. In the north parking lot, Phillips received a gunshot wound to his left wrist based upon helicopter news footage that showed him react to the pain, but he sort of shrugged it off. If you see this, they get shot a lot, and it just doesn't seem to faze them at all because they're on barbiturates.
The King Kong thing where he's like,
get away. Get away. Yeah, I'm full of drugs. None of this is working.
I got that car up here.
Yeah.
You feel like...
Let's see the car. Yeah, go on. If you can display the car for the people who are watching live on stream. That's the Chevy Celebrity. Wow. Yep. That is so 90s. Holy shit. Look at the rims on that thing. It is an ugly, unaerodynamic piece of shit right there. It's probably lined really well, though, so it can absorb those bullets really, really well.
It's got that plush interior.
Yeah, it's got that red leather so that the blood soaks in really nicely. At the same time, approximate time, LAPD gunfire struck the Heckler & Koch rifle that Phillips was firing, rendering it inoperable with a penetration to the receiver. Phillips discarded it and rearmed himself with another assault rifle from the trunk of the sedan. This trunk is sounding like Hermione's bag in fucking Harry Potter or something. It's like
I was thinking the Supernatural brothers.
When they just fucking everything in there. Harry, go and fight the Dementors with this AK-47. After LAPD radio operators received the second officer down call from police at the shootout, a tactical alert was issued. Why wasn't it issued before then?
They were busy.
They were busy. Hello, he's emptying round after round into our cars, and there's 11 people on the ground. The SWAT team, Donnie Anderson, Steve Gomez, Peter Weiretta, and Richard Massa arrived 18 minutes after the shooting had begun. They're still in the parking lot at this point. They were armed with AR-15s and wore running shoes and shorts under their body armor. I don't know why we need that detail. As they had been on as they had been on an exercise run when they received the call. Wow. Okay.
They dropped everything and ran.
Hit. Like, quickly. There's a Del Taco nearby. That's great. Upon arrival, they commandeered a nearby armored truck. I don't know. Apparently, those things are just lying around, which was used to. It was used to extract wounded civilians and officers from the scene. I kind of want your boy from Arizona to roll up in his SWAT tank.
Right?
What was his name?
Joe
Arpaio, Sheriff Joe. And
this is the beginning of when they justified buying tanks.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not here to help anyone. I'm just trying to run over some dogs. Just leave me alone,
vehicle.
Please. Yeah, the vehicle to help people bust into wooden houses by smashing a massive hole in the side of it is ridiculous. While still in the parking lot, Emil was shot in the right buttock, spicy, the right leg, and the left forearm. A fourth projectile that lacerated his upper right eye socket. Oof. Prompted him to duck behind the door of the getaway car in shock. Yeah, you fucking think? He's loaded with bullets. He subsequently abandoned his duffel bag of money, entered the getaway vehicle, and started the engine. Just fucking run, mate. Just go.
You can't run very fast with that body armor on.
No, it's like clunking along. Well, we can't see him. Well, I can hear him. He's definitely running around the corner. There's the sound of metal scraping together. Phillips retrieved the HK-91 from the open trunk and continued firing upon officers while walking alongside the sedan, using it for cover. This is a really amazing moment in the footage where you just see this guy like calmly walking alongside the car, firing randomly.
And it's kind of like a military dismounted sort of approach to it.
Yeah, even though neither guy was trained in the military, it was incredibly well executed from essentially two civilians, non-combatants, who just seemed to know a lot about firearms. So he's walking alongside the vehicle. As he approached the passenger side of the getaway vehicle, he was hit in the shoulder, and his rifle was struck in the receiver and magazine, but bullets fired by police. After firing a few more shots with one arm, Phillips discarded the HK-91 and retrieved the Norinco Type 56 before exiting the parking lot and retreating onto the street while Emil drove down the road. Don't stop till you reach Bucharest. Holy shit.
That's what they look like.
Jesus.
There's their car.
Yeah, there's the car. There's the guys. This is obviously only people in live stream that can see this. They are, wow. They are loaded up to the nines with that stuff. And also the masks. This is at LA. That's got to be really difficult right there.
When was the date? I don't remember.
It was February. So not super hot.
Summer yet.
Yeah, it's probably warm, but I'd imagine that no matter how many barbiturates you take, wearing a woolen mask while you're robbing a bank and being shot at, it's probably going to be a bit of sweat and smell in there. So Emil is driven. He's now in the car. He's driving down the road, hopefully trying to reach Bucharest. I'd imagine 9:52 a.m. Phillips turned east on Archwood Street and took cover behind a parked semi-truck, where he continued to fire at the police until his rifle jammed. Unable to clear the jam, he dropped the rifle and drew a Beretta 92 FS pistol, which he began firing. He was then shot in the right hand by Officer Conrado Torres, causing him to drop the pistol. After retrieving it, he placed the muzzle under his chin and fired. As he fell, Officer John Caparelli shot him in the torso, severing his spine. Either bullet may have been the fatal shot.
Well, I mean,
goddamn.
Props to the cop for realizing that they never stay down. You know, he's got to shoot Michael Myers like 3 or 4 times while he's on the ground.
Double tap. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it's crazy. They always get back up again. Although, I mean, he shot him once. This guy has literally just shot himself in the head. Even if he does get up, he's not going to be very good at coordinating things.
Probably not.
No. Officers across the street continued to shoot Phillips's body several times while he was on the ground. After the firing had stopped, officers in the area surrounded Phillips, handcuffing him, though he was obviously deceased at this point. It was standard procedure to arrest a criminal of this severity as if he were alive and remove his ski mask. You don't feel like talking now, huh? Well, maybe this will change your mind.
Jesus.
It's like, is he dead? I'll make sure. Can you fire a few more rounds into him? We've shot him 8 times. Maybe we should handcuff him as well, just in case. Take his mask off. Well, he looks kind of dead, but just to be sure.
I feel like this scene right here should serve as a lesson to everybody in the next Halloween or Friday the 13th movie. Just keep shooting him while he's down, and when he's there, handcuff him.
Yeah, like if this person has attacked you and has already killed a bunch of your campmates or friends or whatever it is, just empty your weapon into them and then reload and empty again, because
then handcuff them and take their mask off.
Yeah, just to be sure. I'm going to put it back on. Kind of ugly. Emil's vehicle was rendered inoperable after 2 of its tires were shot out by police and the windscreen covered in bullet holes. At 9:56 a.m., man, this is still going on half an hour later, he attempted to carjack a yellow 1963 Jeep Gladiator on Archwood by shooting at the driver, who fled on foot 3 blocks east of where Phillips died. He quickly transferred all of his weapons and ammunition from the getaway car, but was unable to operate the Jeep due to the driver engaging the electronic kill switch before fleeing. That is fucking smart.
That's kind of cool. Although I do that in Grand Theft Auto too, as I shoot at the cars, so somebody will jump out and run away, and I will stop running.
Thank you. Thanks for the car. To be honest, if someone had shot the car at me to get me out of the car, I'd just be like, look, you got to put your foot on the clutch and the windscreen wipers stick a little bit. Please don't kill me. Just take the car.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm doing. I don't want to give them any issues or any reason to shoot at me. It's KCBS and KCAL helicopters hovered overhead. A patrol car driven by SWAT officers Donnie Anderson, Steve Gomez, and Richard Massa quickly arrived and stopped on the opposite side of the truck to where the Chevy was stopped. Emil left the truck, took cover behind the original getaway vehicle, and engaged them in a 2.5-minute uninterrupted spree of gunfire. Emil's chest armor deflected a double tap from SWAT officer Anderson, which briefly winded him before he continued firing. Jesus.
Dude, how did he not melt the barrels off his stuff? Just constant firing like that. That's going to get
2.5 minutes. Yeah, exactly. This is like desperation, spray and pray at this point. Anderson fired his AR-15 below the cars and wounded Emil in his unprotected lower leg. It's the Achilles heel again. That's what always gets you. He was soon unable to continue and put his hands up to show surrender, which the LAPD tend to ignore anyway. So good luck with that. Seconds after Emil's capitulation, officers rushed him to pin him down. As he was cuffed, SWAT officers asked for his name, to which he replied, Pete, which is your fucking name. When asked if there were any more suspects, he reportedly said, fuck you, shoot me in the head. I'm sure he only did that. This might be more roid rage. But yeah, I think with the thick Romanian accent, they're guessing that your name isn't Pete at this point.
Yeah, probably.
Ambulance personnel were following the standard procedure in hostile situations by refusing to enter the hot zone, as the area was not cleared and Emil was still considered to be dangerous. The police radioed for an ambulance, but Emil, loudly swearing profusely and still goading the police to shoot him, died before the ambulance and EMTs were allowed to reach the scene almost 70 minutes later. I mean,
they let him bleed out, huh?
Yeah, that's way beyond your golden hour right there. Like, you usually 10 minutes, he's cuffed, he's restrained. You've got to get someone in on that. That's fucking ridiculous. During a later lawsuit against retired police officer John Futtrell and James Wojtecki, the jurors heard testimony that involved a new ambulance crew that arrived but left with Emil after Wojtecki allegedly told the crew to get the fuck out of here. During the trial, Wojtecki testified he said something similar. The ambulance driver testified he believed he was in danger by being in the area. The officers testified they tried to get the ambulance to come back or to get another one, but the plaintiffs focused on a point which Futtrell cancelled by an ambulance call by telling the dispatcher, I have no officers or citizens down, only a suspect. You got to love the LAPD. Even in a situation like this, they still manage to come out looking like shit, don't they? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I can't wait to rate this one.
I know, it's so good. Later reports showed that Emil had been shot 29 times in the leg and died from trauma due to excessive blood loss from 2 gunshot wounds in his left thigh. Most of the incident, including the death of Phillips and surrender of Emil, was broadcast live on television by helicopters, which hovered over the scene and televised the actions as they unfolded. Over 300 law enforcement officers from various forces had responded to the citywide tactical alert. By the time the shooting had stopped, Phillips and Emil had fired 1,100 rounds, approximately a round every 2 seconds, and inspired basically every Grand Theft Auto mission you've ever played in your life.
Yeah. Countless movies.
Yeah, countless movies, TV shows, you name it, all based on this one incident. On April 17th, 1997, police raided a house in Anaheim traced to Phillips and Emil. Among the items seized included incendiary 7.62 times 39 millimeter ammunition, flak jackets, a ballistic helmet, approximately $400,000 in stolen cash, and various firearms. One particular firearm, a short-barreled AR-15 with an aftermarket red dot sight, was later released from evidence for use by law enforcement agency. Mine. Taking that one.
They took it.
They just like, well, you're not getting that one back. That's useful.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, they're not getting either one of them or anything back.
No, nobody's getting anything back
after this time.
No. 7 months after the incident, the Department of Defense gave 600 surplus M16 rifles to the LAPD, which were issued to each patrol sergeant. LAPD patrol vehicles began carrying AR-15s as standard issue, with bullet-resistant Kevlar plating in the doors as well, which is, man. The year following the shootout, 18 police officers of the LAPD received the Department Medal of Valor for their actions and met President Bill Clinton. I was thinking around about this time, is he getting blowjobs from the intern? Yes, he is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. In 2003, a film about the incident was produced titled 44 Minutes, The North Hollywood Shootout. In 2004, the Los Angeles Police Museum in Highland Park opened an exhibit featuring 2 life-size mannequins of Phillips and Emil fitted with similar body armor and clothing they wore, the weaponry they used, and also on display at the museum is the robbers' getaway car and Officer Martin Whitfield's LA squad car. That, for me, is kind of ghoulish because these men still have family alive and had nothing to do with this crime whatsoever. Emil had 2 kids who were like really young at the time and would have been teenagers by the time this exhibit opened. I just find that really disturbing. By all means, do it like 20, 30 years later, but like fucking 3-4 years, that's kind of crazy, right?
Found that.
That's
their...
they've got homicide written behind them there.
Yeah,
that's their police department thing.
Yep.
Ugh,
wow.
I find that grotesque. To be honest, that's kind of horrible. Yeah, and I get it. You know, the thing is, they didn't kill anyone. Well, they killed someone in an earlier shooting, but in this one, nobody died. There were, I think I may have missed the part, but 12 police officers and 8 civilians were injured, and the 2 suspects died in the shootout. So people were injured, and obviously it's an incredibly traumatic event, but the only people that died were the suspects.
Right.
So, well, the actual villains of the piece. But I just, this is kind of a weird one because it's led to so much knock-on effect for police, the arming of police and carrying of semi-automatic weapons. But I've got to ask, what do you think of this situation? How are you going to rate them as well?
Okay. Well, it's an insane situation. And I want to rate the police as idiots because there was other ways to handle that. This could have been an opportunity for police and policing to shift to a less reactive engagement, dangerous, violent escalation of things is their standard operating. And it could have shifted to investigation, apprehension, tracking, you know, the stuff that would have saved a bunch of people's lives and a whole lot of wasted bullets.
Exactly.
So
it's interesting as well because I was just surprised because we're talking 1996 now, and the Rodney King thing and the LA riots were only a few years before this, and LAPD still had like a really bad reputation around this time. They still kind of do, right? It's still LAPD, but I'm just surprised that the first 2 police officers that saw them going into the back, I am really surprised they didn't immediately open fire on those 2, to be honest.
Yeah, you kind of got to. Yeah, I'm surprised too because I mean I guess it is North Hollywood. They could have been filming a movie there. I don't. But I mean that wasn't the type of movies they were doing then. I mean, Dirty Harry wasn't like shoot 'em ups like that.
No. This is like, I mean, I guess we had Heat, maybe 2 years before this, which had a very famous shootout scene in it. But yeah, man. This one's difficult to rate, I think, because they're clearly idiots.
They caused so much BS, and I mean, the police that let them go, the court system that let them go with their stuff back when clearly they were moving that direction. I understand you don't want to charge people for crimes before they commit stuff, but they stole a car and they illegally had weapons.
Yeah, they had
if you're using a firearm in the commission of a crime, or if you have it on you in the commission of a crime, stealing a car, you should automatically get the time for a violent crime.
I would imagine so. And also, we're talking about explosives. So, like, at what point do we cross into like domestic terrorism?
Well, I don't think that was a thing then. But oh, that's what I was going to mention too. The riots just before that is the only reason LA had a SWAT team at that time.
Wow,
that's what created the special weapons and tactics.
That's really interesting. So had that not happened, could you imagine if this had taken... I mean, obviously they got some AR-15s from a local gun shop, but could you imagine how this would have played out had there not been a SWAT team around?
I think they might have not open fire on them when they left and just trailed
True.
them with a helicopter.
Probably would have done. Yeah, they'll have had an army of people doing the OJ thing.
Yeah,
right after them. But also, like, that's really interesting that they might have gotten away with it. Actually,
possibly.
yeah,
They'd have got shot a lot less if they hadn't raised a gun store or got SWAT team there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I was going to say before you rated this, like, the LAPD and the court system certainly at fault for the response and also the initial part where they could have stopped them. So there's idiocy on that part, and we typically find that after these big moments. But what do you make of Larry and Emil, the two North Hollywood Shootout guys?
The level of violence and just aggressiveness with it, and the drug use, and it was a horrible event. So I have to say that they're at least an 86.
Yeah.
But, well, you know what? They get higher than that. I'm going to go with an 89 because they caused, at least in some part, police militarization.
Yeah.
And the over dramatization, or the what's the word where you create a hero out of a villain?
Oh, right. Yeah. Guess they became anti-heroes, right?
Yeah, so they romanticized gun battles after this, and who knows, maybe it led to a lot of the stuff where people are running around with weapons shooting a whole bunch of people outside of robberies.
I think there's an element of it contributing to that culture where
I think so,
especially with the way the footage is shown, because we don't have any audio other than what's been other than the live commentary from the cameras, and you can see them reacting to getting shot and stuff, but they seem to just carry on. And people think that's kind of normal, but what they don't realize is that these guys were on a massive amount of drugs. So either they couldn't feel it or they just didn't care. So they carried on, and it makes it look like, oh yeah, it's kind of like a video game. They're just kind of going around and shooting, and this goes on for like half an hour. So yeah, it definitely contributed to the culture of shootouts, I guess you could say.
Well, and retrospectively looking back at it after playing Grand Theft Auto, if you hadn't been around then or seen that, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's what's wrong with it? It looks normal.
Yeah, that's totally normal. These two guys covered head to toe in body armor, firing over 1,000 rounds over half an hour. It's kind of crazy. So yeah,
I'm comfortable with an 89. I think because of the violence and the unintended spread of bad crap.
Yeah, I think, like you say, the response to this from like organized policing in major cities, not universally, but in major like hubs where violent crime was maybe a bit of an issue. I think the response has been overwhelmingly overreactive. I don't think the police need the weaponry that they do in the United States. I understand, it's a culture because everyone has a gun, but I feel like it's overkill. And actually, some of it's leaked over into this country because obviously we have armed units in the UK. It's rare that they get used, but whenever they get used, there is never a shootout because nobody has guns except them. It's over very quickly, and usually it was a Mark Duggan case. He had a criminal record. His car was stopped by police, and he was shot like straight away. Didn't have any weapons on him, nothing at all. They just shot him. And the Brazilian guy this is after the 7/7 bombing in London. There was a Brazilian engineer who they thought was a terrorist because he lived nearby and had like slightly suspicious activity or something. Anyway, they followed him onto a London Underground bus and just shot him. London Underground train, and just shot him like right there. And then Giovanni dos Santos or something like that. Anyway, just killed him in broad daylight in the middle of rush hour. His family is still fighting for compensation to this day. He had nothing. It was not a terrorist. Had nothing on him at all. No weapons, no suspicious activity. It was just really bad intel. So that kind of escalation of the armament of police, I think, while you can say it's a good thing that they are armed and they respond the way they do to certain situations, I think the response to other situations has been completely over the top. Yeah. Even like basic stuff. This is a big story in the UK in the last couple of years. A former athlete, a former footballer called Dalian Atkinson, who was having a bit of a psychotic break outside of his father's house, and he was like trying to kick the door in, stuff like that. 2 police officers showed up and they tasered him. They tasered him for so long that he died.
Oh.
And when he was lying on the ground dead after being tasered, the female officer who had like been part of it kicked him in the head.
Oh,
kicked his corpse in the head. So yeah, they're both no longer police officers, and actually I think one of them went to prison for murder. So yeah, I know, and that's just a taser. So kind of crazy the level of militarization in normal human life in some parts of the world now.
And I too, I see that you want to react to like active shooters and engagements like in a certain way. But I feel like if you're needing military equipment to do your job, you should probably call the military.
Yeah, like aren't they're a response. I guess that it's like a question of like time and response, and SWAT has its place, but I just wonder how many, because you don't hear too much about like major scale armed robberies. Don't really hear much about it anymore. So I'm just wondering why these are that necessary. Like, why do police need semi-automatic weapons anymore?
The war on drugs.
Oh, that's right. The thing that hasn't worked because it's a war on a noun, and that never ever works. You can't defeat a noun; they're invincible. But yeah, war on drugs, which has been ridiculous. At this point, we've got to say, like, look, the United States has legalized cannabis, and the world has become significantly better as a result of that. Isn't it time we look into the control of other substances as well, and also provide support for people who have addiction problems, get them access to free treatment so they do not become reliant on these substances, and control the way in which they're used, and like make sure they're not cut with crap anymore so that people keep dying of it.
Oh yeah.
So,
that's the hot new thing, man.
I know.
Fentanyl death,
prescription painkillers. It's not so much a problem here. It was is still a huge problem in the United States. And yeah, I think that there needs to be a radical change in the way that people look at drugs. This war on drugs that's been going on since Nixon?
Yeah. And it's weird because it's like, dude, cigarettes are cool. Alcohol is cool.
Yeah. But these specific substances
do the same thing. I mean, alcohol to me here in the States is the cause of domestic abuse and violence and fights and stabbings and crazy shit all the time. But it's cool.
Yeah. And there's very little control over that. And people are still getting, I guess that you guys have it's weird that the age for drinking in the UK is 18, but you can have there's a rule where you can have a pint with a meal when you're 17, which I think is a really great way of introducing. Like you can have 1 pint if you order a big meal, so you're kind of consuming it with food, so you're not getting quite as drunk. And also private consumption's 5 or something, so you can introduce it at the dinner table when your kids are becoming adolescents. You can be like, okay, we'll give you a little bit of wine. I mean, there's problems with alcohol all over the world, but the more you make it taboo, the worse the problems are typically. So, you introduce it appropriately at a young age, then that's fine. And if you talk to people about drug use from a young age, if you talk to them about addiction problems at the young age, if you talk to them about appropriate behavior, appropriate use of sexualization, which is another issue as well. If you talk to them about that continuously from a young age, you talk to them about what's right, what's wrong, how to deal with it, who to talk to if you have a problem. If you approach it from a place of empathy, if somebody says they have a problem, if you approach it the right way, these problems go away, but we're still reacting inappropriately and it's still leading to situations like this. Anyway, that's kind of a rant. That's a whole other thing.
It's a good rant. It was a good rant. We should be way more proactive than reactive in all of this stuff. And someday we'll pull our heads out of our asses and make the world a better place.
And I do know that there's a big hot topic thing in not just America, but I think in parts of the world as well about you shouldn't be giving children of a certain age sex education. You absolutely should be telling children what is right and wrong in sex, because from a reasonably young age, because people talk up and you stop having victims when that happens. You get them to recognize what is inappropriate behavior and it stops it from happening.
Yes. So. And I feel like I finally did something right as a parent, and I had a good conversation with my kids about that and how to talk about it and when you should and how you can and what's good and what's bad, and get rid of the taboo and the stigma and the fear and create a safe place for education and growth.
Knowledge is power at the end of the day. You trust people with the knowledge of what is and what isn't right. And, you know, it leads them to be better behaved citizens. It leads them to recognize issues with people around them, which can stop victims from being created, not just sex, but drugs, alcohol, gambling, every kind of thing you can, eating, any kind of addiction you can think of, guns. All of this stuff is intertwined. It's all about education from a young age in an appropriate way that uses information and that is empathetic and teaches them about the consequences. It's really not that difficult, but for some reason, we're terrified of doing this. And it's causing situations like this, where you have massive bodybuilders getting hold of drugs and holding up things. Anyway, that was like 25 years ago. That was a long time ago. Things have changed a lot since then. But this is not a political rant. I just feel like this is a very straightforward solution that's been proven to work, and people still aren't quite doing it. So, yeah.
I don't know why, and I don't know how I can help, but someday I'll figure it out. Maybe by talking about it like this with you.
Maybe with more people talk about it in a way that looks at the core issues as opposed to going for the emotive, stop talking to my child about sex or drugs, or stop talking about drugs. Like, no, you're just making it worse by doing that, man. So anyway, rant over. Really nice score for Emil and Larry, who... yeah, one of the most incredible videos that you will ever see if you ever do decide to watch it. One of the most incredible stories as well. And yeah, the guy who is kind of the prototypical gangster of the early part of the 20th century. What was his name again?
Arnold Rothstein.
Arnold Rothstein, yeah, the kind of the first ever true modern gangster. And that's really fascinating stories this week. Arnold Rothstein was incredibly successful, but died incredibly young. These two were also successful in their own way and died young, and had both instances, had they known when to stop, then they would probably, you know, have lived long, happy lives. I was going to say they're both still alive today. Arnold Rothstein would be 145 fucking years old, but you know, they would have had long, successful lives, but they couldn't because there was something in them that made them want to carry on doing the thing that was incredibly dangerous, despite being already successful enough.
Yes.
So just know the line and stop. Move on to something else. Discover a hobby. Maybe go fishing. Whatever works. Just stop with the dangerous shit. So that's our show for this week. What did you... because you really enjoyed researching that, and I did too as well, even though it was a weird story. That was really interesting. Thank you for doing that, Derek, because I never knew that about that guy. So many connections there.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to our fans that talk to us and tag us in things on Instagram, because you guys are awesome. That's fun. I had somebody friend me on that BeatStar too, and they are better than me also.
You got someone to play against on BeatStar. That's awesome. As a result of this, that's great. Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. And also, I forgot to mention the bloody socials at the top of the hour again, and I've still not got our banner rolling up. I thought I'd set that up, but apparently I hadn't. If you would like to follow us on social media, you can go to History's Greatest Idiots on Instagram, or go to @GreatestIdiots on Twitter. If you would like to sling us some cash, go to patreon.com/historiesgreatestidiots. We will be looking into changing that soon. So different, because we've got like 1 million different levels and nobody's using it. So we'll look at different ways of making that and hopefully get you guys involved. And also linked in the notes of this podcast and in the actual YouTube, if you're watching it on YouTube, there are links to our individual social media. So if you want to go and check us both out there, Lev and Derek, myself and Derek have both got plenty of links there that you can use. Although Derek, it's no longer available on Twitter.
Nope, I bailed.
You bailed. I think I'm not far off from that either. So, yeah, give us a follow. And until next episode, Derek, would you like to say goodbye, please?
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you so much. And we will see you again in a couple of weeks. Take care now. Bye.